Have you ever looked at everything you own and thought, I'm wealthy on paper, so why do I feel so cash poor? For many business owners and real estate investors, their wealth is real, but it's trapped in assets they cannot easily use. We helped one family begin to unlock it. Stay tuned, you're not going to want to miss how we took this simple problem and really were able to turn it into something significant for this family.
Welcome into Legacy Beyond Wealth. I am Ben George with Rob Shelton, as always, and we got a good one today because I know we're talking about listen, you want to really pay attention to your investment portfolio, make sure you're managing that. But what if a lot of your money and a lot of your wealth is tied up into a business or into real estate, right? It really speaks to why planning is so important. It really becomes a really big part of success long term, right? When you make these choices that really investment advice alone is going to miss. So that's what we're going to talk about today with Rob. And how common is this, Rob, to feel like, okay, I am feeling pretty wealthy. I feel like I'm in a good position, but I don't feel like I have much flexibility financially.
I'd say it's more common than people realize. Just yesterday, I was meeting with someone that took us up on that second opinion to take a look at what they were doing and looking to become a client. And they had 9 million locked up in real estate and about 20 million locked up in business equity. And, that can create a problem where they feel like, hey, I feel like I'm wealthy on paper, but when you take a look at it, I feel a little bit more cash flow poor. And, that example and others, they have millions of dollars of equity in a company or property or both. And that wealth cannot necessarily be readily available for all sorts of things, pursuing the next opportunity, helping their children, giving generously to charity, or simply just providing a cash reserve and that peace of mind that can come with a cash reserve that's there. And that creates a frustrating disconnect. They've succeeded financially, but they don't always feel financially free. And their assets are extremely valuable, yet their choices can feel like they're limited or painted themselves into a corner. And that was a challenge facing this family that we're going to be discussing a little bit today. They've done a wonderful job building wealth. They already had a financial advisor, but the problem was that relationship was primarily focused on their investment accounts. And while investment advice is very valuable, it could not solve the problem that was rooted in here with the real estate and it being illiquid with taxes if they were to sell the property, how to make sure it could generate future retirement income, meet their charitable goals and the family goals all together. And no one had stepped back far enough to be able to connect all these pieces. Just to give a little bit of background, this family owned a Park City rental valued at about just under $3 million. And after the mortgage payment, it was putting out, roughly about $40,000 a year. And when you consider that amount of rent for the amount of equity locked up in the real estate, it was a small amount overall. And the asset or the home had appreciated significantly, but the spendable income that it was spitting off was modest compared to what the capital they had tied up into it. Or in other words, they were real estate rich and cash poor, as we kind of use that phrase. And sometimes that phrase can sound a little bit odd, but people hear a $3 million property and they assume that, there can't be a cash flow problem. But a valuable asset and spendable cash are not the same thing. You can own a very expensive orchard, but if the fruit harvest is small, the orchard doesn't necessarily fund your life. What ultimately made the difference here was not just one clever decision or one part of the tax code. This is really where it got to be fun. It was taking a holistic view and coordinating it with the right professionals around the family. We've talked about that before, Ben, making sure we've got the dream team working together. So we brought together that tax professional, the real estate professional. So we focused the sale on the Section 121 exclusion and the 1031 exchange and donor advised funds. And we're able to really design a really awesome plan for them. And this is where the secret sauce was in the coordination of all of these things. So we weren't just simply looking at tax savings in a single year. We were asking, how did today's decisions create a better tax planning opportunity and flexibility in the future years ahead? This really was an impact that came from everyone working together to build a great plan around this family.
Yeah, thanks for sharing those details and kind of taking us into that conversation and kind of how that process works. And again, if you want to go back and listen more about how the dream team, as Rob kind of labels it, is put together at Axio Wealth, we've done videos on that. I encourage you to check it out and kind of get a better look inside the process there. But back to this family and this story, Rob. So when you kind of break out those numbers too, it's interesting kind of hearing that 1.4% return. That seems very negligible. So as you're talking about, hey, what should we do with this? Was the obvious answer just, hey, let's go ahead and sell the property?
Yeah, and that's one thing that they had talked about with their tax professional for years, but the thing that they couldn't get around is that would have really created a substantial tax bill and really cut into the wealth that they were looking to be able to create. And there's also an important detail that allowed some really creative planning to take place. It's important to mention here. The rental had also primarily been their primary residence before, and so that opened the door to evaluating two sections of the tax code together, taking Section 121, which can allow you to exclude a portion of the gain from the sale of a primary residence into not having to be taxable, and using Section 1031, where you can defer gains on a qualifying real estate investment. And so using those two things together really helped out the client. And this strategy, some people jokingly will take Section 121 plus 1031 and call it a strategy of 11 21 type of a strategy, but really it's not anything specific to that. It's just using those two pieces of information to really have a substantial impact for the family.
Well, let's explain that a little bit deeper for people that maybe aren't totally familiar with some of the options out there and kind of what this process looks like. That Section 121 that you mentioned, what does that potentially do for them?
Yeah, and I appreciate people's patience. We're diving a little bit deeper today than we typically do, but wanted to really illustrate the importance of going deep with a client to really understand how to have a big, substantial impact in helping them unlock that financial freedom to live their best life. So bear with us a little bit as we go into the tax code here, but that Section 121 may exclude up to $500,000 of gain if the ownership and the use tests are met. Generally, the home must have been owned and used as a primary residence for 2 out of the last 5 years prior to the date of the sale of the home. There are other requirements, and depreciation from the rental period generally is not sheltered by this exclusion. And that 5 year look back creates a clock. So if someone moves out and converts a home into a rental, waiting too long can cause the formal residents to fall outside of that 2 out of the last 5 year use test. And in this client's case, we recognize that window was still open but rapidly closing. And so we were able to find a solution before that window closed and take advantage of it.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that explanation. And you talked about the 121 plus the 1031 strategy. Where does the 1031 exchange fit?
Yeah, when you by the time of the sale, the property was being taken care of. The property was being used as an investment rental. That opened up the window of opportunity to evaluate a 1031 exchange for a portion that they wanted to keep invested in real estate. They really liked the real estate aspect and wanted to keep it some money there. So instead of rolling everything over into another large property, the family acquired 3 newly constructed townhomes, all combined at about 1.65 million. Remarkably, these 3 townhomes generated approximately the same combined cash flow, about that 40,000 a year, as that approximately $3 million Park City property was able to generate. And so, the cool thing is they didn't lose any income. They actually increased their rate of return, because that 40,000 is now on that 1.65 million versus the full 3 million. And we were able to still take money off the table to be able to help that client in other areas and planning that we'll talk about here in a little bit. This was playing to win. Not merely did we just do a 1031, but we kept some cash flow. We kept the same cash flow while reducing the capital need that it produced. They also moved from one concentrated property into 3 separate properties. I think it's important to note. This allowed them to diversify their risk. So if one unit went vacant, the other 2 were still producing income. And so in the future, they could also sell one townhome 1 year and another townhome another year and diversify the tax impact. So as we look at the planning, instead of just doing one big 1031 exchange, we were able to do three smaller exchanges, get that same 40,000 in income, and provide a lot of flexibility into the future for them.
Yeah, I think the benefits, as you kind of break them down there, you can kind of see and paints a picture to have that flexibility is nice and not feel all wrapped up into one property. And I guess doing it this way allowed them to free up the cash as well, right?
It did, and that was a really important part of all of this is, we talked about being real estate rich and cash poor. This allowed them to take over $1 million off the table to be put into cash that they could use for other opportunities as well as other planning. And so, for some people that might be debt, paying off debt, or being able to invest for those opportunities that might be there that they wanted to take advantage of, or just that security of knowing that they had that money sitting in a liquid position versus others. And I want listeners to hear what this really means. The family did not suddenly become wealthier on the day of the closing. They already had the wealth. Planning changed that form of wealth from being an illiquid trapped asset in one property into a combination of still keeping the same income that the real estate was producing, provide over $1 million of now liquid capital that they could be able to use for the rest of their life. This is like taking water that's been frozen in one large block and turning part of it into a liquid form. The amount of the water may not have changed much, but its usefulness and how it can be used certainly did. And part of that plan was to take more than 300,000 and just keep that in cash reserves, because that's what the family felt like they needed to feel safe and secure. And, as the family moves towards retirement, that cash reserve can provide both a cushion and a planning tool. For example, selectively spending cash may help them manage income in future years. So if we take a look at it, that's tax-free money that's sitting in a cash reserve that they could use for doing Roth conversions later on down the road as they live on that cash. And just so many good future planning opportunities. So this wasn't just about, hey, let's just focus on how to save taxes this year. We also were able to plan for a lot of flexibility in the upcoming years to tee them up for future success.
Yeah, and that's the whole reason you plan, right? And kind of getting into the tax aspect of this, was that 1 million automatically tax free because of the sections 121 and 1031?
Yeah, so when you take a look at it, Section 121 excludes the qualifying gain on that 500,000, and the 1031 exchange deferred the tax. So deferral
Okay.
doesn't mean that it erased the tax, but the replacement properties generally carry forward a reduced tax basis. And the cool part about this with the 1031 exchange is that their goal was to be able to have this real estate pass to the next generation. And so when they do that and they pass away, the heirs will get a step up in basis. And that's another thing that we looked about here with the flexibility, is really looking at how we can plan in those future years. And I think that's important because this wasn't just a strategy we took off the shelf. This was custom designed around the client's goals and what they said their best life was. And that's really, again, going back to that cool part, is bringing these professionals together to really be able to come up with something that was custom designed for the family.
Are you ready to unlock the freedom to live your best life? Schedule your no-cost 60-minute discovery meeting with our team today. During this session, we'll take the time to understand your family's story and financial dreams. Together, we'll craft a personalized roadmap designed to help you achieve your goals. Let's explore how we can unlock the freedom for you and your family to thrive. Just click the link in the description of today's show to get started.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so important about what you guys do, and that's what we talk about all the time here, that legacy beyond wealth. And it's all about what's most important for the family. How can they use that wealth, right, to benefit others? And I know for this, the family also wanted to give to charity. I think in this situation you mentioned, how did that change the plan? How did that work into everything you were discussing?
Yeah, when you take a look at the charitable aspect of it, we were able to take about 300,000 and put that into what we call a donor advised fund. And I think we've talked about that before on this podcast a little bit. So utilizing another strategy, the wife is a very successful career and has an extremely high salary. And so by doing that donor advised fund, we're also able to save a lot on income tax. That would have possibly have been due as well. In fact, after all this dust settled, they got about 26,000 back on a tax return. And she didn't change her withholdings from the previous year. It's just that's the type of tax planning that was done. And they'd never seen a tax return. They were always used to paying taxes in previous years. And so, when you take a look at that charitable aspect and we were able to have that be a part of it, it really had a big impact for them.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I'm curious, when you look back on this and you evaluate, this process and this family and everything that you guys were able to kind of work through here, what do you identify as being the biggest success here? Was it the taxes? Was it the cash, the rent, being able to be able to change that, or the charitable gift? How do you view it?
If it's okay to call myself this, and my kids do all the time, a little bit of a nerd, I got excited about all the planning and opportunities. But when you take a step back, the best part about all of this is seeing that this family is able to really live their best life. To have them come in and put down their goals and not be told, oh, you can't do this because of this, or just simply looking at something and quickly saying, well, that's going to cause this kind of a tax. But using that collaborative opportunity with other professionals, with us kind of playing that quarterback role and being able to see this from beginning to the execution at the end, and seeing the client be able to trust us through that process, man, that's just very satisfying. That's what gets me excited to wake up and go to work every day for my clients, is really being able to see them be able to unlock the financial freedom to be able to live their best life. And we don't use that saying lightly. And for this family, it was about unlocking the liquidity on that financial freedom. They already had it. It was just a matter of how do we structure the assets, maybe restructure some things and leverage the tax code so it's not going to take a huge bite out of their wealth to help them meet their goals and live the life that they want to.
Yeah, that's awesome. And, I'm sure there's somebody watching this that maybe feels like they are in that maybe trapped position where they don't have as much flexibility. But who hearing this should maybe be thinking about this kind of planning?
Yeah, I think when you take a look at it, if you've felt that maybe you're not getting the full effect of having all of your professionals being coordinated, or looking at a holistic approach. Remember, they had a financial advisor prior to this and were receiving financial advice, but it was mainly just on their liquid assets. No one had taken a look and really tried to dive deep. So if you're feeling in that situation, or you just feel like, I'd like a second opinion on what I'm looking at, we'd love to be able to sit down and go through that and have a discovery meeting with you and see if there's something that might work for you and your family.
Yeah, I love that. You can always get in touch. That contact information down in the show description for you, but take advantage of that discovery call, right? Begin talking about, hey, what's most important to you and your family? What are some of the goals that you have? And hey, how can this comprehensive approach to planning with this dream team really help you out? What does that look like moving forward? That's all that you can discuss there with Rob and the team at Axio Wealth Management. But great story, Rob. I know, maybe into the details a little more than normal, but I think that's important to kind of really kind of paint the picture of how the planning takes place and what actually it accomplishes. And I think we did that today. So appreciate you telling that story.
Thanks so much, Ben. Appreciate your time.